The 1987 film The Running Man, based on Stephen King's 1982 novel of the same name, was not well received, neither by the author himself, nor by his fans, nor even by Arnold Schwarzenegger's followers. Now, decades later, the story has been revisited with the release of a new film adaptation. Today, we'll take a look back at the history of the original movie and explore its most significant differences from the book. In his memoir on writing, Stephen King notes that he wrote The Long Walk and The Running Man before his debut novel Carrie, although they were published much later. He even describes The Long Walk as his best work from that early period, with The Running Man serving as a natural evolution of the same idea. The novel sold well. The first print run of 40,000 copies sold out quickly. One day, George Linder, the owner of the country's largest supplier of lightweight wheelchairs, came across The Running Man in an airport bookstore. He had never heard of Richard Bachman and had no reason to question the author's identity. Linder simply believed he had discovered an excellent story that could be adapted into a successful film and saw it as an opportunity to try his hand at a new role: film producer. He contacted the author's agent and was somewhat taken aback to learn that the agent was asking for a rather high price for the film rights to a book that had sold fewer than 100,000 copies. Nevertheless, they reached an agreement. The author accepted an advance of $20,000, with the possibility of an increased payment if the film eventually went into production. Shortly afterward, Linder approached Rob Cohen and Keith Barish, who were then producing several large-scale genre projects through their newly established film company. In 1985, it became public that Richard Bachman was actually a pseudonym for Stephen King, a revelation that provided the final push to begin work on the film. Initially, the project was offered to George P. Cosmatos, who had just completed Rambo: First Blood Part 2. In his vision, The Running Man was conceived as an allegory of the Holocaust. The protagonist was envisioned as an intelligent schoolteacher who was imprisoned as a political dissident and then forced to participate in a deadly television show. According to the director's vision, the hunt for the protagonist was meant to resemble a true manhunt, with Ben Richards escaping from the city and the pursuit continuing across the desert. This concept was somewhat closer to the original novel, but Cosmatos and the producers failed to agree on the budget, leading the director to leave the project. After that, the film's development became mired in production hell, going through several directors before finally being handed over to Paul Michael Glaser. Lead actor Arnold Schwarzenegger later criticized Glaser's directorial approach, claiming that the final film felt too much like a television show and lost the deeper subtext of the original story. However, this criticism is somewhat debatable. Glaser was brought in to replace Andrew Davis, who had been fired after falling significantly behind schedule, and the production never fully recovered from that setback. The film's original budget was $18 million, but after Paul Michael Glaser was confirmed as director, production costs rose to $27 million. Schwarzenegger was not the first choice for the lead role. Christopher Reeve, Patrick Swayze, and Dolph Lundgren were all considered before him. Reeve was even confirmed for the role for a time. For his participation in the film, Iron Arnie received a $5 million paycheck. By comparison, he earned $750,000 for The Terminator, $1.5 million for Commando, and $3 million for Predator, which was also released in 1987. Schwarzenegger's appearance, however, was noticeably different from the book's description of the hero as a gaunt man marked by tragedy. Although many critics called The Running Man the actor's best film since The Terminator, it was a box office disappointment. With a $27 million budget, it grossed only $38 million. Nevertheless, over time, the film achieved cult status. Now let's take a look at the most significant differences between the original novel and its film adaptation. From the very first pages of the book, it becomes clear that the screenwriters retained only a few character names and the central idea of a brutal televised competition set in a totalitarian future. Stephen King's The Running Man depicts a dystopian society struggling with ecological collapse and a poisoned atmosphere. Employment at nuclear plants renders people sterile, and the few children who are born often develop lung cancer by the age of 5. In this bleak world, the unemployed are forced to survive either on meager government benefits or by participating in the cruel yet highly profitable games run by the Network Gaming Corporation. The Running Man is the most dangerous, most prestigious, and highest paying of them all. In the Running Man game, the contestant is hunted over an extended period, and the longer he survives, the greater his final reward. Unlike in the film, Ben Richards in the novel, an unemployed man who has been blacklisted, enters the game voluntarily. His motivation is not the fabricated massacre of starving civilians in California, but a desperate need to earn money for his young daughter's medical treatment. In King's story, Richards is an ordinary slum dweller, not a helicopter pilot as depicted in the movie. In the film, he has neither a wife nor a child, only a brother. Yet one crucial element remains the same in both versions: the portrayal of the media as a powerful instrument of deception and manipulation. In the film, the government frames Ben Richards. After he refuses to open fire on an unarmed crowd from a helicopter, the authorities portray him as a ruthless criminal and send him to prison. In the novel, after Ben agrees to participate in the game, the television network employs the same deceptive tactics to turn public opinion against him. The media fabricates images of enemies of the people, distracting society from pressing issues such as air pollution, poverty, and human rights violations. The book also depicts the brutal suppression of popular protests. One notable episode is the so-called Housewives Massacre of 2024, when 200 police officers armed with machine guns and electric batons attacked a column of women heading to the Southwest Food Distribution Center, killing 60 of them. In this respect, the filmmakers clearly drew inspiration from the novel. Additionally, the protagonist's backstory in the book is entirely different from that of the film. In the novel, Benjamin Stewart Richards is 28 years old, another notable difference from the film, in which Arnold Schwarzenegger was already 40 at the time of its release. Ben Richards was born on August 8, 1997, in Harding. His father left the family when he was 5 years old. From ages 5 to 16, Ben and his younger brother Todd were separated and forced to struggle for survival on their own. Their mother died of syphilis when Ben was 10 and Todd was 7, and 5 years later, Todd died in an accident. Left alone, Richards began working in a factory after school, completing full 8-hour shifts. He worked tirelessly, haunted by the desperate thought that he had no one left in the world. From September 2011 to December 2013, Ben attended South City Technical School, where he was suspended twice for disrespecting the administration. On one occasion, he kicked the assistant director in the thigh, just as the man turned his back on him. At 16, Ben married Sheila Gordon, who was 2 years his junior. After the wedding, he dropped out of school. During their 11 years of marriage, the couple never had a serious argument. Ben worked as a laborer at a nuclear plant but resigned in 2018, realizing that with each shift, his chances of having children were diminishing. Upon quitting, he had a confrontation with his foreman, openly expressing his frustrations about the plant. The argument escalated into a physical altercation, and as a result, Richards was blacklisted. For the next 5 years, he eked out a living doing odd jobs, primarily unloading and loading newspapers. But finding work became increasingly difficult, and soon even this source of income dried up completely. Television had fully replaced the printed word. During the most difficult period of their lives, a miracle occurred. Sheila unexpectedly became pregnant. They had a daughter, whom they named Catherine. However, when she was only 18 months old, she fell ill with pneumonia. They had no money for treatment, and the doctors could not guarantee that Ben would ever be able to become a father again. Finding himself in a desperate situation, he decided to participate in one of the cruel games. The book describes how Ben undergoes a medical examination and takes a test, during which he behaves rudely toward the female examiner, seriously offending her. As a result of the screening, he is selected to take part in the show The Running Man. The show's executive producer, Dan Killian, tells Ben plainly that the program is one of the most effective ways to eliminate potential rebels. He adds that in the 6 years the show has been running, no participant has ever survived. According to him, the show's creators intended to maintain such stable statistics. With no other choice and desperate to save his daughter, Ben agrees to participate in the game. Another notable difference between the book and the film is the portrayal of Dan Killian. In the film adaptation, Killian is presented as the show's host, a role played by Richard Dawson, and perhaps it was indeed an inspired choice. He was nominated by Rob Cohen's wife, who also served as the film's casting director. Dawson, the real-life host of the popular American game show Family Feud, was ideal for the role of a cold-hearted sadist willing to send someone to their death for the sake of high ratings. During filming, Dawson reportedly often treated his colleagues rudely, made unauthorized changes to the script, improvised inappropriately, and refused to show fear of Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. Nevertheless, His portrayal was so convincing that the producers frequently overlooked his antics. For this role, Richard Dawson won a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor. In the novel, the game takes place across the entire country, rather than within a ruined urban area as in the film, where participants are pursued by professional killers. In the book, the Game Corporation's hunters operate mostly behind the scenes, and their leader bears no resemblance to the eccentric villains such as Ball Lightning or Dynamo. Ordinary citizens can report a participant to the show's organizers in exchange for a substantial reward, making the chances of survival virtually zero. The novel thus emphasizes the moral decay of a society in which everyone, even children, is willing to betray a person for $100 or $1,000 new dollars. Additionally, in the original plot, there is no live television broadcast. However, a unique strength of the film The Running Man lies in the screenwriter's technical innovation. In the movie, participants are fitted with tracking devices, which simplifies the hunter's task and makes the plot more dynamic. In King's novel, the condition for participating in the game is video recording, which the contestant must submit twice a day to confirm that he is alive and following the rules. These recordings allow the hunters to calculate his location. From a visual standpoint, personalized villains, embodied by vivid antagonists, make a stronger impression in a fantasy action film than an invisible, faceless threat. Ben's participation in The Running Man, however, is much longer in the book than in the movie. Toward the end of the story, we learn that he surpassed the previous participant's record of 8 days and 5 hours. In the novel, Richards takes a hostage and heads to the town of Derry with her in order to hijack a plane. This inevitably brings to mind another Stephen King novel, It, which is also set in the fictional town of Derry. In the book, the hero's companion is named Amelia Williams, while in the film her name is changed to Amber Mendez. According to the plot, she is a journalist who has moved into Richard's brother's apartment. In the novel, he takes her hostage when she goes to the store, whereas in the film, her capture occurs earlier. In the novel, Richards takes a hostage and heads to the town of Derry with her in order to hijack a plane. This inevitably brings to mind another Stephen King novel, It, which is also set in the fictional town of Derry. In the book, the hero's companion is named Amelia Williams, while in the film her name is changed to Amber Mendez. According to the plot, she is a journalist who has moved into Richard's brother's apartment. In the novel, he takes her hostage when she goes to the store, whereas in the film, her capture occurs earlier. Additionally, unlike the film, in the novel her abduction takes place during the game, after Richards encounters the underground fighters. The ending of King's novel is also more tragic than the film's. After alerting the media to his location, Richards heads to Derry Airport. The police attempt to stop him, but he outwits them, bypassing security and the chief hunter, Evan McCown. Pretending to carry explosives capable of destroying the entire facility, he forces them to retreat. News of Richard's success inspires the previously submissive lower class to rise up against the oppressive elite across the country, and the police are powerless to stop it. Richards takes McCown and Amelia hostage and orders the pilot to fly low over populated areas to avoid surface-to-air missiles. Killian contacts him and reveals that he knows there are no explosives on board. The aircraft's security system would have detected them. To Richard's surprise, Killian offers him a deal to fake his death and become the new chief hunter. Richards hesitates, unsure whether to accept. Then Killian informs him that Sheila and Katie have been dead for over 10 days, killed by the attackers. He gives Richards time to consider his decision. Richards calls back and formally accepts the offer, feeling that he has nothing left to lose. After the connection is broken, he kills the crew and McCown, but is fatally wounded in the process. Summoning his last ounce of strength, Richards orders Amelia to save herself by jumping with a parachute, then crashes the plane into the skyscraper where the show is being filmed, destroying the organizers of the inhumane game and dying in the process. The film contains only a brief reference to the novel, the moment when TV presenter Dan Killian makes Richards an offer, which he rudely refuses. The ending of the film, however, is completely different from the book, concluding instead with a typical Hollywood happy ending. Understandably, the filmmakers could not afford to show such a grim conclusion on the big screen, especially given that the topic of terrorism was considered highly sensitive at the time. A year after The Running Man was released, the first Die Hard hit theaters, featuring a police officer confronting terrorists who have seized a skyscraper. Notably, one of the screenwriters for Die Hard was Stephen D'Souza, the same writer who had previously adapted Stephen King's The Running Man for the screen. Thank you all for your attention.